"Why did you strike my daughter?" she asks. "Yes, I slap her. So what? Who are you?" "I am her stepmother, Isabella Montclair. So you touch my daughter, then it's time." Vivien realizes that Sophie Lane, the girl she mocked, is not just connected to power, she is power. A poor girl is slapped in a boutique, only to reveal she's the heiress of the woman who once owned it, turning her enemy's empire into her legacy. But before we start the video, let us know where you're watching this video, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe, Story Store, and please share your thoughts about this story in comment section. In the heart of the city's luxury district, fashion heiress Vivien Kingsley storms into an upscale boutique and slaps a modestly dressed girl trying on a gown. The sound slices through silk and marble like a gunshot. Gasps echo across the boutique's high-gloss floors. A mannequin crashes behind the counter as the clerk jumps. A champagne flute tips over on a display shelf, the bubbly pooling near designer heels. "Throw her out!" Vivien hisses to security, her voice sharp as broken glass. She has no right to even breathe near this collection. The girl, Sophie Lane, staggers back a step, her cheek flaming red, but she doesn't cry, she doesn't scream. She simply looks at Vivien, wide-eyed but unmoved. She clutches the lavender gown to her chest like armor, the fabric still shimmering from her touch. "Who let this charity case into my store?" Vivien sneers, circling Sophie like a predator. "Didn't you read the invite, sweetheart? This is for real clients." Sophie opens her mouth, but no sound comes. She glances down at the wrinkled sale flyer in her hand. VIP stamped in gold. It had seemed like a miracle this morning. Now it feels like a trap. The boutique freezes. Staff members exchange nervous glances, unsure whether to follow orders or stand down. Vivien turns to the clerk who had helped Sophie earlier. "You're fired," she snaps. "Pack your things." But before anyone can move, the boutique manager, a sharply dressed woman with a Bluetooth earpiece, rushes to Vivien's side. She leans in close and whispers something into her ear, just one sentence. Vivien's face drains of color. Her stepmother is Isabella Montclair. Silence follows like a cold wind. Vivien stares at Sophie, her lips parting slightly, confusion and horror swirling in her eyes. Her hand, still tingling from the slap, falls limply to her side. Sophie, trembling but upright, tilts her chin up. For the first time, it's not fear in her eyes, it's quiet power. And suddenly, everyone in the boutique realizes they've just witnessed the beginning of something far bigger than a fashion faux pas. That morning, Sophie Lane had stood outside the boutique for a full 10 minutes, clutching the gold-trimmed VIP flyer like it might disappear if she blinked. Her coat was a little too thin for the season, her shoes scuffed at the edges, but she walked in with cautious hope, her eyes wide at the glittering displays. Inside, the boutique gleamed with designer opulence, mirrored walls, soft jazz, and salesgirls who moved like swans. A kind clerk with a gentle smile noticed her hesitation and asked, "Looking for something special?" Sophie nodded shyly. "Just browsing." The clerk guided her toward a rack near the back, where a lavender gown shimmered like moonlight. Sophie gasped. "It looks like something out of a dream." The clerk, charmed, helped her into a fitting room. As she stepped out in the dress, something changed. Vivien Kingsley had entered. She paused mid-step, her gaze slicing across the boutique until it landed on Sophie. Then she laughed. Loud, cruel, performative. "Who let the thrift store Cinderella try on our dresses?" Heads turned. Staff went silent. Vivien circled her like a lioness with a limp gazelle. "Look at those shoes, that hair. Are those paint stains on your hands?" Sophie's cheeks flushed, but she didn't flinch. She stood still, eyes steady, chin lifted, like someone who had been hurt before, but learned how to survive it with silence. The staff said nothing, but something in their expressions shifted, from amusement to unease. Vivien smirked, satisfied, but beneath the surface the room had changed. They didn't know who Sophie was. Not yet. But somehow, everyone felt they'd just watched someone important get humiliated, and they were all going to regret it. Sophie stepped out of the boutique with burning eyes and trembling fingers. She didn't know if she was humiliated, angry, or just numb. Her reflection in the glass door looked like a stranger, cheeks red, lips pressed tight, the beautiful lavender gown now a ghost in her memory. Then a sleek black car slid up to the curb like it had been waiting all along. The back door swung open. A driver in a sharp suit stepped out and bowed slightly. "Miss Lane?" he said with surprising respect. "Your stepmother sent me." Sophie blinked. "My what?" The man offered no explanation, only held open the door, like refusal wasn't an option. Cautiously, she climbed in. The car smelled of leather and jasmine. On the seat beside her, a slim silver phone buzzed to life. Her name flashed on the screen. She answered with a whisper. "Hello?" A calm, poised voice responded. "Did she touch you?" Sophie froze. "Yes." Silence. Then, "It's time then." The line went dead. The driver didn't wait for further instruction. The car pulled away from the boutique like it had a purpose long in motion. Inside the boutique, behind tinted glass, Vivien Kingsley watched from the window. She was frozen, hand gripping the edge of a display, her face pale. The girl she'd just slapped had left in that car. She knew it. Everyone in their world did. That car belonged to Isabella Montclair. Vivien's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't just made a scene in her boutique. She had awakened a ghost from the shadows of fashion's highest towers and touched someone untouchable. Sophie Lane was no ordinary girl. She was her daughter. 3 years ago, after Sophie's mother died and her father followed not long after, the world forgot her. But one woman didn't. Isabella Montclair. Known to the fashion elite as the Ice Queen, Isabella controlled empires from behind mirrored boardrooms. Never seen, only felt. She was the kind of power people whispered about but never dared approach. And yet, when Sophie was lost in grief, Isabella appeared at her doorstep. No cameras, no announcements, just quiet eyes and a single offer. "Come home with me." Sophie, only 16 then, said yes, but she begged to stay out of the spotlight. She wanted no headlines, no press, no legacy, just peace. Isabella agreed. For 3 years, Sophie lived in comfort but out of sight. Until today. Now, Isabella's rules were broken, because someone laid a hand on her daughter. She stood before her private mirror, watching the boutique footage on repeat. The slap, the dress, Sophie's face. Then she spoke, cold and sharp as a diamond blade. "If the world wants to see who she is," Isabella said, slipping on her gloves, "then let's give them a show." The Ice Queen was no longer staying silent, and the fashion world had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Vivien Kingsley arrived at Montclair Enterprises in a state she'd never known, uninvited. Her usual confidence had cracks in it now, barely concealed beneath designer sunglasses. A silent assistant led her through marble halls to a glass-walled conference room where Isabella Montclair sat waiting. Impeccably dressed, unreadable as ever. "Why did you strike my daughter?" Isabella asked, her voice calm, but lethal. Vivien forced a laugh. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know." Isabella slid a folder across the table. Inside, security footage, photos, witness statements, a drafted lawsuit. Vivien's name was on every page in bold ink. "I could ruin you in 3 headlines," Isabella said. "But that would be too kind." Vivien's throat tightened. "You knew the name Sophie Lane," Isabella continued, "but not the blood behind it." It hit like a blow. Sophie hadn't just been protected, she'd been chosen, groomed quietly by the most feared woman in the industry. And now the curtain had lifted. Vivien's empire, her brand, her influence, her image, suddenly felt built on sand. But what shook her more was Isabella's final sentence as she stood to leave. "This isn't revenge, Vivien. This is introduction." Vivien sat frozen, her world tilting. Sophie Lane wasn't just back, she was being launched. 2 days later, the boutique's glass doors opened again, and in walked Sophie Lane. But this time, there was no hesitation in her step. She wore no entourage, no designer armor, just confidence and calm. The same clerk who had once helped her stood straighter, nervously smoothing her name tag. "I'd like to try that dress again," Sophie said. The lavender gown, now steamed, polished, and displayed under special lighting, was handed to her with quiet reverence. As she stepped out of the fitting room, something in the boutique shifted again. Not fear, not awe, recognition. Vivien, watching from behind a display, stiffened. Sophie gently smoothed the gown's fabric and whispered, just loud enough to be heard, "My mother designed this." Heads turned. She worked here before she died. This was her final piece, and she never got credit for it. Vivien's jaw clenched. Her perfectly manicured fingers curled. She remembered the name now, Margaret Lane, a talented designer who was dismissed, forgotten, her work buried under others' labels. And now her daughter stood in the spotlight wearing her legacy. Vivien said nothing, but her silence roared louder than any apology. Outside, in a black car, Isabella Montclair watched with folded arms and a knowing smile. Phase 1 was complete. Vivien's annual charity gala was the crown jewel of her social empire. An exclusive night of flashing cameras, flowing champagne, and carefully curated perfection. But this year, something unexpected shattered the script. Just as the red carpet was about to close, a hush rippled through the crowd. A sleek black car pulled up. Out stepped Isabella Montclair, glacial, regal, and on her arm, Sophie Lane. The photographers froze, then chaos erupted. Who is she? Is that Montclair's daughter? Sophie, radiant in the lavender gown her mother once designed, moved with quiet poise. She didn't need to pose. She simply was the moment. Vivien, at the top of the grand staircase, felt her stomach flip. She watched as guests turned, whispering her name, but not in admiration this time. Curiosity and confusion followed Sophie like a spotlight. Then, just as the room began to settle, Sophie stepped onto the stage. Vivien's breath caught. "Good evening," Sophie said into the mic, voice calm but commanding. I'm here to honor someone forgotten, my mother, Margaret Lane." Gasps, murmurs. And just like that, the gala was no longer Vivien's. It belonged to Sophie. And her story was only just beginning. The room fell silent as Sophie stood beneath the chandelier's golden glow, her voice steady. "I'm proud to announce the Margaret Lane Scholarship," she said, "to help girls like my mother, gifted, unseen and forgotten, get their place in fashion." Applause erupted, but Vivien stood frozen, her smile cracking at the edges. Then an older man stepped forward from the crowd. Quietly, he approached Sophie. "I knew your mother," he said gently. "She didn't just design that dress. She owned part of this boutique before it was taken from her." Sophie's eyes widened. "Taken?" He nodded. "By Kingsley's father. She trusted him. He erased her." Gasps echoed around the room. The cameras were still rolling. Vivien's face drained of color. Sophie turned back to the mic, heart racing. So, this boutique was built on a lie? Even Isabella, seated in the back, leaned forward, lips parted in surprise. Vivien took a step back as whispers grew louder. The story was spiraling, and she was no longer in control of it. Sophie didn't need revenge. The truth was sharper. And now, with the world watching, the truth had a microphone. Within 48 hours, Isabella Montclair's legal team launched a full-scale investigation. Old contracts, forgotten ledgers, witness accounts, everything pointed to one truth. Margaret Lane had been swindled. Vivien's world started crumbling. Prestigious clients backed out. Social media turned brutal. Headlines asked, "Did Kingsley Fashion steal its legacy?" But amid the storm, Sophie did something no one expected. She walked into Vivien's office, alone. "I don't want to destroy you," she said quietly. "I want to fix what you broke. Let's co-own the boutique. Build something better, together." Vivien scoffed. "You think I'd share my name with a girl who wore thrift store shoes?" But behind her fury was panic. Her lawyers had already warned her. If Sophie pushed forward, she could take it all. That night, Vivien did something desperate. She ordered a deep background check on Sophie Lane, searching for dirt. Something to discredit her, to reclaim her edge. But instead of weakness, she found a memory. A girl at a lake. A child in danger. A quiet savior who vanished. And in a flash, Vivien realized. The same girl she had slapped once saved her niece's life. And she had no idea who Sophie Lane really was. Vivien couldn't sleep. She stared at the photo from the report. A lakeside snapshot, years old. A young girl with soaked clothes kneeling beside a coughing child. Her niece. She remembered that day, the panic, the fear, the relief. No one ever found the girl who pulled her niece from the water. Until now. It was Sophie. The girl she humiliated. The girl she tried to erase. Vivien's heart pounded as realization cracked through years of pride. Sophie had saved her family and asked for nothing in return. And in return, she'd slapped her in public. The next morning, Vivien did something she never imagined. She called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Journalists buzzed. Vivien stood at the podium, pale but resolute. "I'm here to apologize," she began, "to Sophie Lane, the woman I disrespected. The girl who once saved my niece's life," gasps echoed. Even Isabella blinked. Vivien's voice shook. She wore a dress her mother designed, walked into a store her mother helped build, and carried herself with more grace than I ever did. She looked into the cameras. "I was wrong, and it's time the world knows who truly built our legacy." The Ice Queen watched silently, but her eyes gleamed with something new. Respect. The press conference was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Cameras flashed as Vivien stood at the podium, her usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. Sophie Lane stood beside her, a quiet strength radiating from her. Vivien's voice wavered as she addressed the crowd. "I've wronged Sophie Lane. I humiliated her, dismissed her, when all she's ever done is stand with dignity. She's the daughter of Margaret Lane, a woman whose legacy I tried to erase. But she's also the girl who saved my family." A stunned silence followed. Even Isabella, seated at the back, looked on with something close to pride. Vivien continued, her eyes meeting Sophie's. "Before I knew her name, Sophie saved my niece's life at that lake. I was blind to who she was and what she meant. Today, I see her. I see her strength, and I owe her an apology that words can't fully express." The crowd was silent, then erupted into applause. Sophie stepped forward, a gentle smile forming on her lips. I forgive you, Vivien, not because I have to, but because we both deserve a second chance." The applause grew louder, and for the first time Vivien felt the weight of her own humanity. Sophie had already forgiven her. But this was the beginning of her redemption. The boutique, now renamed Maison Lane, stood as a symbol of reinvention. The past, with all its mistakes and wounds, was now woven into a tapestry of new beginnings. Sophie and Vivien, once bitter enemies, now shared the spotlight, each owning a part of the legacy they had both fought for. The rebrand was bold, fresh, and spoke volumes about their growth. But it wasn't just about the name. It was about what they had become together. Sophie launched mentorship programs for girls like her, ones who had dreams but no place in the world of luxury fashion. Vivien, with newfound humility, ran the operations, learning to listen, to build, to lead with care. The boutique's doors opened wider, welcoming anyone who dreamed of a future. It wasn't just a place to buy clothing. It was a place for reinvention. One evening, during a mother-daughter fashion walk, Isabella Montclair stood beside Sophie, her arm wrapped around her daughter's. "The world sees you now," she said softly, her gaze proud. Sophie smiled, but it wasn't just for herself. "No," she replied, "now they see my mother too." And in that moment, as the crowd cheered, Sophie understood what it truly meant to carry her mother's legacy, and her own.